The long-awaited new pharmacy contract has been unveiled in Wales. This is an innovative contract with the emphasis on the patient's needs. Not only will our pharmacies in our communities throughout Wales continue to dispense medication, but we will be more integrated into the primary care landscape by providing more clinical services. To give you some background, we have been in negotiations with Andrew Evans and the Welsh Government since before the pandemic, which has unfortunately held up our talks. At this juncture, I would like to put it on record an appreciation of the work the executive team at Community Pharmacy Wales has done to make this as smooth as possible. On top of this, the board has worked tirelessly on these negotiations. The board was split into 4 groups to work on proposals and offers to Welsh Government. These deliberations were then scrutinised by the full board before being put back to Welsh Government. Each of these work streams was eventually signed off by both sides. When all work streams were complete and the overall package was examined and all agreed mutually by Welsh Government and Community Pharmacy Wales. As I'm sure you are aware, I have continually banged the drum for clinical services since I became chair of CPW. My views were fashioned by a pragmatic vision of protecting the contractors in Wales from people like Amazon and the realisation that linking supply with clinical services was the best way to protect the network. Therefore, with this in mind and tied to what Welsh Government were expecting from us, CPW has negotiated the new pharmacy contract with the Welsh Government to push the agenda for community pharmacy forward. We hope this contract will hasten a fundamental cultural change in primary care, where pharmacies will become the first port of call for patients requiring care. Pharmacies will treat the patients it can and signpost the patients it can't to more appropriate clinicians.
Mae'r newidiadau yn y fframwaith cytundebol fferylliaeth gymunedol yn cynrychioli y newid mwyaf sylfaenol i'r ffordd y mae fferyllfeydd yn gweithredu ers dechrau'r gwasanaeth iechyd dros 70 mlynedd yn ôl. Mae'n presgripsiwn newydd ar gyfer fferylliaeth gymunedol yn nodi dull cydweithredol, arloesol a blaengar o ddarparu gofal fferyllol. Bydd y cytundeb a gyhoeddwyd heddiw yn galluogi pob fferyllfa gymunedol yng Nghymru i ddarparu ystod eang o wasanaethau clinigol sydd ar gael yn gyson ledled y wlad gan gynnig gwasanaeth iechyd cyfleus i fwy o bobl yn nes at eu cartrefi. Mae fferyllwyr yn arbenigwyr mewn meddygyniaethau ac yn ymgymryd â hyfforddiant heleth. Bydd defnyddio sgiliau timau fferylliaeth gymunedol yn golygu gallen ryddhau gwasanaethau meddygon teulu a gwasanaethau eraill y gwasanaeth iechyd i gleifion ac anghenion mwy cymhleth, a darparu gwell mynediad at driniaeth a chyngor i bobl sydd â problemau iechyd mwy arferol. Dwi'n croesawu'r agwedd gadarnhaol tuag at trafodaethau a gymerwyd gan fferyllfeydd cymunedol Cymru, gan groesawu ein hychelgais ar gyfer gwasanaeth fferylliaeth gymunedol wedi ailddychmygu, sy'n rhan anatod o dirwedd gofal sylfaenol gref. Mae'r trefniadau newydd yn cydnabod ac yn gobrwyo fferyllfeydd sy'n deall, yn rhannu ac yn cyflawni'n hychelgais tymor hir ni i ddarparu gofal iechyd cynaladwy effeithiol o ansawdd uchel. Yn wahanol i'r toriadau gyhoeddwyd yn Lloegr yn 2016, i ni yng Nghymru wedi parhau i fuddsoddi yn y sector fferylliaeth gymunedol. Ond ni wedi gwneud buddsoddiad mawr yn y dyfodol yn amodol ar ddiwygio parhaus, a fyddai'n darparu ar gyfer mwy o wasanaethau sy'n canolbwyntio'n glinigol ar fferyllfeydd. Yn 2020, cytunwyd ar gytundeb ariannu aml flynyddol cyntaf Cymru ar gyfer y sector fferylliaeth gymunedol. Roedd hyn yn rhoi y sicrwydd oedd ei angen i berchnogion fferyllfeydd barhau a'n diwygiadau i sicrhau bod gwasanaethau fferylliaeth gymunedol yn diwallu anghenion i bobl Cymru. O fis Ebrill 2022, byddwn ni'n cyflwyno gwasanaeth fferylliaeth gymunedol glinigol cynhwysfawr newydd, a fydd yn codi'r bar ar y hyn y gall pobl Cymru ei ddisgwyl gan ei fferyllfa leol. Bydd y gwasanaeth hwn a gomisiynydd yn genedlaethol yn galluogi pob fferyllfa yng Nghymru i ddarparu gwasanaethau ar gyfer anhwylder y cyffredin, cyflenwi meddyginiaethau brys a brechu rhag y ffliw tymhorol. Fe fydd yn ehangu'r gwasanaeth atal cenhedlu brys i ganiatáu fferyllwyr gyflenwi ystod ehangach o ddulliau atal cenhedlu. Fe fydd yn cynyddu'r cyllid ar gyfer darparu gwasanaethau clinigol o'i lefel bresennol o 11.4 miliwn i 20 miliwn y flwyddyn erbyn mis Ebrill 2024. Bydd hyn yn cefnogi'r gwasanaeth fferylliaeth gymunedol clinigol estynedig a darparu gwasanaethau arloesol, presennol a newydd gan fyrddau iechyd i diwellu anghenion lleol. Mae'r cytundeb fframwaith cymunedol newydd yn adeiladu ar y cynnydd sylweddol a wnaed eisoes, ac mae'n ymrwymiad clir i ail-ddychmygu'r rôl y mae fferyllfeydd cymunedol yn ei chwarae yng Nghymru drwy newidiadau clir, stepwise, sy'n sicrhau cynaladwyedd hirdymor y sector.
Community pharmacists across Wales have been telling us for some years now that they feel that they could use the skills that they have to deliver a much greater contribution to NHS services in Wales. And so we've been pleased to work as a willing partner with Welsh Government and with Health Board colleagues to develop a new contractual framework, which will see a greater focus on the delivery of clinical services. Now, that's not to say that the important task of ensuring that people get the medicines they need, when they need them, and they know how to take them to get the best results remains a high priority for all of us. But we're convinced, and government is now convinced, that we can deliver a much, much greater contribution to the NHS through the delivery of a whole range of clinical services that will be available to patients, often without the need of an appointment, on every high street across the country. And that's why we're so pleased this week to be helping to launch this new contract with Welsh Government and with the NHS in order to ensure that community pharmacy maximises the contribution it can make to the NHS, relieving pressure on other parts of the NHS as we achieve that. So we're delighted to be part of this partnership that has now reached this milestone in the development of a community pharmacy network fit for the period going forward.
The last 2 years have been incredibly challenging for community pharmacies in Wales. But throughout that time, you've demonstrated how important and valuable the services you provide are to communities right across the country. In the last few months, we've been working very hard with your representatives at Community Pharmacy Wales to finalise reforms to contractual arrangements for community pharmacies. Those reforms are designed to meet the changing needs of the NHS and citizens in Wales. In the future, people will want to access their medicines differently. They'll want to spend more time speaking to the highly skilled pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, and pharmacy teams we have available to us. That will involve delivering more clinical services, taking pressure off other less appropriate parts of the NHS. That will be great for patients and great for pharmacies. Importantly, these reforms will ensure that pharmacies remain viable, sustainable assets within our communities, helping contribute not only to the health and well-being of individuals, but to community as a whole. This, of course, means what happens in community pharmacies may need to change. Many of you are already providing a far greater range of clinical services. We want to make sure those services are provided more consistently and more widely across every part of Wales. That means we'll be making more services mandatory so that every pharmacy can provide them and that every citizen can be confident that they will get those services regardless of which pharmacy they visit. We'll also be investing in those services, allowing health boards to commission more services locally, and really excitingly, increasing the number of pharmacies able to provide independent prescribing services. Initially for extended minor ailments and contraception, but in future potentially for a much wider range of illnesses. That has a huge potential to take pressure off general practice, but also accident and emergency departments where people can present inappropriately. The reforms we are making need to be underpinned by 6 principles. We need to make sure pharmacies have capacity to deliver the services we want them to provide. We make sure capability is improved so that pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, and pharmacy teams have the right skills to deliver for the citizens of Wales. We need to reinforce the importance of collaboration, working with other pharmacies, working with other healthcare professionals, and working with our communities to make sure the things we do are the things citizens in Wales need. We need to improve continuity, making sure people see the same pharmacist in the same pharmacy more often. We know that improves outcomes for people, regardless of which healthcare profession provides it. We mustn't lose our sense of community. Pharmacies are social assets. They build social capital. They help people to stay well by being resources within our communities. And finally, we need to give you the tools you need, particularly through connectivity, access to information, and the ability to contribute to people's healthcare records so that the things that pharmacies are doing don't go unnoticed within the rest of the NHS.
The new contract certainly signals a pivot point for community pharmacy in Wales, setting a direction of greater clinical care being delivered in community pharmacies and less focus on the operations of dispensing. And we've been very careful to ensure that that transition is managed properly. We've considered how the contract has been constructed, the annual reviews that have been built in, and also how we have been engaging with contractors up until this point. And perhaps most importantly, from the very beginning of discussions as part of the negotiation team, we have kept focus on the future vision for pharmacy in Wales. Initially, our discussions focused on agreeing where both sides wanted to take community pharmacy in Wales in the future. And with that alignment on that shared vision, we broke the framework into themes to work on over a number of months, bringing them all back together at the end to ensure that we were heading in the right direction. The negotiation process has taken many, many months, punctured by having to address the pandemic, of course, but the discussions have always been productive, solution-focused and helpful.
The new contractual framework sees the continuation of the community pharmacy primary care cluster lead role, working with their community pharmacy colleagues across their cluster, as we have done during the last financial year. There will be a full evaluation of this relatively new role at the end of the next financial year to understand how we can best use this role to integrate community pharmacy into primary care clusters. So it's really important that as many contractors as possible engage with their community pharmacy cluster lead, and that will help us refine and develop this role moving forward. The collaborative working scheme requirements will be agreed as part of the annual review with Welsh Government. The quality and safety scheme provides contractors with another important opportunity to liaise with their primary care colleagues and further cement community pharmacy as an integral part of the primary care cluster.
The Community Pharmacy Wales team are putting together a whole suite of resources to support contractors to help them successfully implement and deliver the new contractual framework. We have created a technical guide, and that, alongside the slides from the contractors' events that were held over the last couple of weeks, will be added to the newsletter in the coming week. We're also creating contractor guides on the different elements of the contract, and a frequently asked questions document will be created, based initially on the questions from the contractors' events, but also will be regularly added to over the upcoming weeks and months. CPW have also created a presentation on the new contract for external stakeholders, which can be used by the primary care cluster community pharmacy leads to raise awareness of the new contract locally. All of these documents will be added to a new section on the website, and links will be included in the weekly newsletter as more materials are added. Our contractor engagement team will also be out visiting contractors and are available to provide support to contractors whenever, both face-to-face or by phone and by email. They'll be providing data and support as required to contractors and are only ever a phone call away.